Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Defiant Takes Football Primetime Preview Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean, and I'm back once again with Nick Merriam at Nick with Sports on Twitter. Nick, how you been? You getting through the season?
Yeah, about a month in here. Fourth game is Saturday, so we're grinding away, and it's getting better, I think, in terms of the workload, but it's still crazy.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Nick is on the staff at Stony Brook, on the football staff up there. So he is in the thick of it. Now, we are going to be talking about the primetime game to come, the Giants at the 49ers tonight. We're going to preview it. But first, we are going to take a look back at some of the rookies we wanted to highlight from week 2 of the NFL action. So if you are watching live, it'll be the rookies and then primetime preview. And if you're listening on the podcast after the fact, then you'll get the rookie segment at the end of the recorded podcast. So that's the schedule for today. And I suppose we should just jump right in. Is there anything that you wanted to comment on as far as this past week of NFL that's not specific to the rookies? Anything that cropped up as far as piquing your interest?
I mean, this is my favorite iteration of Washington football team I've had. It really is. Like, I don't care if they lose their next 15 games. I love this team. They are awesome. That's my thing. That's it.
Yeah. No, I feel that. They're fun. I haven't really gotten to watch them too much. I've been trying to keep up with everything, but they haven't been in a game that we've highlighted on the show yet. But I'm sure that will change shortly, being 2-0. And you know what? The NFC is wide open. So, 2-0 doesn't mean anything except that they're in a really good position going forward.
Big test.
Better than 1-1, definitely a lot better than 0-2.
Yep.
Man, my Jets, that game was rough. It was rough. Defense just didn't show up. They did not. I think they were so hyped for that Bills game that even losing Rodgers, they were just kind of already in the mindset. And I feel like the following week, everything set in. The realization that he wasn't going to be there hit. But I do expect him to bounce back. Now, Wilson's not known for playing well against the Patriots, so that might be interesting. But I think they'll bounce back.
Dallas is an unfamiliar opponent. They might be the best team in football too. Like, we'll see after the Trevon Diggs injury today, but they look very good. And this is going to be kind of what you get with the Jets with the way they're constructed now. There's going to be games where just the process doesn't really turn out great against a team that can score a lot, and Dallas is an explosive defense is going to sometimes make you struggle, but they'll have games where they surprise you against better teams. It's a long season. We're still kind of in the early stages and trying to figure out what's going on. So, we'll see. That's why, they play the Patriots this week. Like, that could go a lot of different ways. Washington plays the Bills this week. Definitely could go one way more likely than the other, but a lot of different things could occur. We could be talking about who knows what next Thursday, So,
Absolutely.
Really.
All right. So, Nick, let's talk rookies. First player that you wanted to highlight was Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison. Went later in the first round to the Vikings. He was my second favorite receiver out of the class. So where he went was approximately right in my mind. That's where I valued him. That's where I figured he would go around. And it seems like the Vikings got exactly the player I thought, although I think his route running is already even a little better than I thought it was, even at USC. So what is it that made you want to highlight his performance coming out of the game against the Eagles?
Well, he's been kind of the opener for their offense. Like, when they've moved the ball well, it just had ridiculous turnover luck. That's been crazy. Of losing 6 fumbles in their first 2 games. I texted you about this. Like, I believe there were 7 teams total last year that had 6 or less fumbles, like, all season long. or fumbles lost. So it's been tough in Minnesota. Like they're kind of getting screwed a little bit here with that, but it's not for a lack of their ability to move the ball on offense. It's kind of the fact that their defense has been crap as well. They have thrown the ball downfield, and most of that has been Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. That was expected. They really haven't had the run game to open up the play action a whole lot the way we've seen in the past years. So it's been kind of, can you win downfield? And in Jefferson's case, like it's been a little bit of everything because he's excellent. But Addison has come to the table here with exactly what he showed at USC as a guy who can find his way open downfield and like wide open legitimately a couple of times on these touchdowns he scored. Like this guy has that kind of burner over the top speed or just ability to get that space that is not quite Deshaun Jackson like, but he has that like effect on a game for this offense where we saw this USC. It was very different the way he played at Pittsburgh. Didn't necessarily know exactly what type of player he's going to be in the NFL. And early on, he looks like a big play threat that has the ability to flip a game where, quite frankly, on Thursday night, like it was a blowout and they get that big play and all of a sudden they're like back in it and they're moving the ball and they didn't, really ever come close to getting the game tied up again, but they pushed the Eagles a little bit. They covered the spread, which was our prediction. And
one of the only games I got right last week.
Yeah.
God.
So exactly. You gotta get the ones that matter, right? And those are the ones that we were on camera for. So, but he might not be a guy who's going to be a career like 1,200 yard a season for like 3 or 4 seasons type guy, but he will be like an 800, 900 yard guy who consistently flips game scripts because of this ability.
Yeah, for sure. I think with what he does right now, he's not going to be a high touch player for the most part because he's a smaller guy. He doesn't necessarily work super well underneath. He also, at least for the time being, isn't really included in most of their 12 or 21 personnel sets because even though he's already a better receiver than Osborne, he is usually not the guy in there because he's not the greatest blocker. And you also see that he needs to work on his release package a little bit because he's smaller and he can get physical at the line of scrimmage and press, which you saw a lot against Bradbury. So I think that they want him to be able to win quickly before he starts getting a lot of those shorter, quicker pass reps. But he does have that third gear, right? Like he's explosive off the line. He's got good speed, but it's that third gear where he can, really accelerate after the stack in particular that I think makes him so good down the field. Plus he's good at tracking the ball as well. So I really like what he brings to the table. He's a willing blocker despite not being super great at it. And I think that he's ready to be the number 2 now, even if he does ultimately see less overall snaps. I think from a threat perspective, he is the number 2 threat on that team.
Yeah, and I think, if you were having any concerns about how he was going to replace Adam Thielen's production last year, I think he's blown that away like immediately. And I wasn't personally concerned about that at all because I thought Thielen kind of had a big drop off in terms of his ability to just run last year. He's gotten a little older. We're seeing that in like Carolina's offense right now. They don't have anything, and he might be like one of the few guys that is somewhat reliable to get open because he just knows what he's doing. But Addison gives him a little bit more of a boost, I think, in terms of their athleticism on the outside. And that I think, has been important for a team who, quite frankly, looks troubled by missing Dalvin Cook. And I'm not a guy who likes to point out like running back, matter type thing, but I think it is killing him a little bit right now because Madison has been, not as capable of kind of hitting these, zone rushing holes, like immediately getting upfield and the offensive line has been not as good as it was the year before. I think that was like a big part of their 13-win breakout was the fact that the tackle play was so much better and they were able to kind of, get the interior downhill in the run game. But you had to have something here that keeps the offense going with the loss of Thielen and the loss of Cook. And I think early on, this is their answer. Like they might just need to throw the ball 40 times a game. And I don't know if they will do that, but I don't think I don't think it's impossible they could win games doing that, Yeah,
I know. I agree. I think what really needs to improve is obviously ball security. But beyond that, I think their defense just needs to get better because they're scoring, they're moving the ball, and yeah, those mistakes will kill you. But
and honestly,
like you said, we can't expect that kind of fumble rate to continue throughout the year. It would be pretty crazy. So assuming that gets a little better, they need better performances out of their defense.
I think what's tough is I think the defense has looked better. It's just there was a long way to go.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And as far as Addison in particular, I mean, he's already good with his double moves. So on the route that he won for the touchdown, it was like essentially picture perfect. He's up against Bradbury, gets the inside release. He stacks first firmly, and then he cuts inside for the post. And it's just like he just killed it. And he even had to come back for the ball, but his balance was fantastic. Caught it, shook off like basically a falling tackle from Bradbury and just walked in. So like that's kind of what you envision from him throughout this season. He had a couple of other catches as well, working back to the ball on a bootleg, on a naked bootleg to one side. And then, like I said, I think his game it's already quite well defined. Like he plays very well within his talent, like his God-given talent, what he is physically, he does well. So I look for that release package to just get a little bit better for some faster wins so that he can maybe start working into some of those slants, working into some more comebacks. But he embraces his role as a deep threat for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
I think he'll continue.
Go ahead.
Numbers. That's all. Yeah. It's consistent.
All right. So that takes us to Patriots cornerback Christian Gonzalez. So this is a guy that, Kyler and I have talked a little bit about what it meant for him to go to the Patriots and how fortunate it was for them that nobody pounced on him earlier, and what a good place it is for him to develop as a corner. But also it's one of those things like, how do we let this happen where this kind of player gets to such a perfect location? I think that he's already improved on who he was as a college player. I think the physicality that the defense in New England embodies, I wouldn't say he's certainly not dominant against the run, like far from it, but he's making strides in the right direction. He's involved in defending the run. We saw some missteps, but I didn't see like a lack of physicality that we had talked about when he was playing at Oregon. So what have you thought about Gonzalez up to this point?
Well, so I was kind of with Kyron on some of this. I wasn't as low, I think, on him as Kyron was. I still had him as like my CB2, and I thought he was like reasonably arguable as like your CB1 in last year's draft. But he was a developmental guy to me. Like he was a very, very, very interesting specimen athlete, guy that you probably put into a zone heavy scheme and see like, what he becomes kind of year two. You're hoping he's a really good player. And he probably could be a top corner in the NFL with that projection. And I think we've seen, similar types of jumps from corners in the first round recently. But he goes to New England, which is not really that type of defense, but they're known for developing this position. We've seen him do it with like Jack Jones even last year, and even Marcus Jones playing a little slot corner. Like those are not high picks, and those guys are immediately producing. I don't know what they're doing differently, but they find ways to get these guys who are just athletic and have like, quite frankly, like high school type resume football play where it's like, oh my God, this guy's just big and he can run and we'll see what he can do if we stick him on the field. And they teach them how to play man, and it works. And they get these guys, there's a bit of a buy-in with the Patriot way where like you have to be physical. It's kind of hard to not be and like play in that locker room. So I will say like, that's not a big surprise to me. Like going there that's the type of thing. Like if you want to fix it, like that's the best place you could possibly go. Like there and like, I guess Pittsburgh, right? Like Tomlin will get it out of you. But, this is just another like checkbox for Bill Belichick figuring out how to get corners to play really well early in their careers. And it's impressive how he does it. But I'm honestly like at this point where I think they could have selected anybody and like been like, this is our first round corner. He's playing man. And they'd be looking really good right now.
Yeah, well, he was my corner one last year. Yeah. And I understand the love for Witherspoon, but I just thought that Gonzalez was so athletic, had all the size that you could ever want out of a corner with those gifts. And he was extremely natural and instinctual in coverage. And I just think that some of those things you can't teach. I think you can teach physicality, you can instill it. Now, maybe you're not going to, go from, maybe you're never going to be Peanut Tillman, right? But like you can get better. You can get good enough without that. And so for me, I just felt like as long as he went to the right place, then he was going to do really well. So in the particular game against the Dolphins on Sunday night, he didn't really have a ton of opportunities to make plays because with the threat of Hill and Waddle and everybody that they have with all the speed, most of the Patriots game plan was really just to kind of sit back, give space off the line. There was not a lot of press reps and just, wait for them to make the mistake. And that mostly didn't happen, which is why the Dolphins did ultimately win the game. But it's kind of the only thing that you really can do, because if you make a mistake, they will kill you for it, which we also saw. So the pick that he had was one of more unique opportunities that he had, because he was actually playing a deep half in that play, which was kind of funny. And so Hill releases up the field, and he's basically playing safety. He plays it perfectly. He turns, runs, and with his athleticism, he had no problem keeping up with that much of a head start down the field. Tua forces it and gets hit, so the ball's a little underthrown, and he just like goes up and gets it with his athleticism. But it was picture perfect as to how you would play it. A couple of negatives. There was one play to the outside in the run game where he basically he locked up against Hill, and he just wasn't nearly aggressive enough to angle his body to the edge so that he could get out and make the tackle. He was just way too passive in that moment. But I would say that was more or less an outlier as far as his play against the run. And then there was the long touchdown to Mostert. But I'm not really sure that you can pin that on him, because he had to protect the edge there. And I don't remember which gap it went through, but it was, I think it might have been the B gap, or either A gap with a pulling guard or a B gap or something. And it was just so well blocked. It was wide open, and he just blew through the hole. And with Mostert's speed, I don't think there's anything you can do. So, it looked bad with him chasing him on the play, but I don't think that I would put that on him. Just my personal opinion. Outside of that, he had really good coverage on a third down when Miami was backed up against their own end zone. So it was press, jammed him at the line, ran with him really well. So I thought that it would have been fun to see more dynamic matchups, but it's just not how they played that game. And so I thought, in terms of the opportunities he was given, it was definitely more good than bad.
It's definitely interesting that he ends up making a play in something that's more in a type of coverage that's probably more similar to what he was doing at Oregon, especially when they're running these cover six, a lot of cover six, a lot of cover three. Like you're in a deep portion of the field and you're trying to kind of just be rangy. And I would expect the Patriots to continue to do that with him, just because it's a way to get the guy to be comfortable a little bit more. It's a way to kind of get him more involved in the game. Maybe he takes some safety snaps. I don't know. Bill wouldn't be the craziest thing he's ever done. This guy does kind of have the physical tools to do something like that. But they're not against rotating their defensive backs as much as possible. But it's a weapon for them. That's how they use these defensive players. They think about how they can put them into specific play calls that they think they can get a certain offense with. The Dolphins, maybe the first team we've ever seen where it's like they don't know how to scheme them up for a turnover, right? It's like this team right now is just operating on a different level in Miami, and it's because of that speed. And so the fact that he's able to even produce and look solid against this offense right now, early in his career, is a very good sign for his development.
Yeah, for sure. I think that we can expect him to likely become one of the top corners in the NFL. I don't want to put a number on it, top 5, top 10, anything like that. But certainly his athleticism and what we've seen early puts him on that trajectory. All right, so now we're going to go to two rookies who played in the same game. We're going to start with Marvin Mims from the Broncos, and then we're going to turn and look at Emmanuel Forbes from the Commanders on the other side. So Marvin Mims was a second-round pick for the Broncos late in the second round. I think it was their first draft pick this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And he goes for 113 yards and a touchdown off of his 2 receptions. So for Mims, he is even more of a defined deep threat than Jordan Addison is. There's, I would say, a lot less overall versatility to his game outside of just being blazing fast. You can use him on some sweeps and stuff like that, which we've seen. But his route running is not it's not as dynamic, it's not as developed, but he is really fast. So you obviously have a great deal of insight into this game. What were your thoughts on Mims?
I thought it was awesome, but it was kind of weird how this guy had his 2 catches. They didn't have a single other target the rest of the game. He actually had a 30-plus yard punt return that set up Denver like in Washington territory up 21-3. And at that point, you're like, oh, this game's over. And then he didn't touch the ball the rest of the game, and they didn't do anything to get him the ball really. And it was interesting because I think, and we could have the same thing about Hyatt today. I probably underrated these deep threat receivers a little bit more this year than I should have. And not because I didn't think and the problem isn't that they're faster than I thought they'd be. The problem is that it doesn't matter. We're better nowadays at using speed to get guys open. If they're competent enough to run the route, catch the ball, track it, and then do a few other things to round out their game. In Mim's case, it is taking those, handoffs. It is returning punts. It's going to be helpful for your offense. And ultimately, Mims was killing them early. I mean, his touchdown was kind of a perfect play call. They had, the right flow into beating cover 2 off of a 6-man blitz, off pressure, off play action. He was left wide open. Percy Butler was flat-footed kind of from the opposite half. That would have been the guy who could have picked it up. And that wasn't going to happen, right? But again, we talked about this with Hyatt and his scouting against Alabama. It's the speed to be able to say, oh, we have the right play call, but also he's fast enough that he's just going to run right through it. And you're not going to be able to adjust for us having the right play call, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a double, it kills you, right? There's no way you can adjust for it. Once you're in a bad spot, you're dead. And he has that. And then again, the second deep shot, which was over Forbes, we're going to talk about in a second, just kind of showcased his ability again, just to have that speed that immediately ends the play when you're in a bad position. In Forbes' case, he was not lined up correctly. Kind of got sucked in looking at the offensive line, took a couple too many steps inside, and then Mims has a mandatory outright side release, and he's just up the sideline. And really, I don't think Forbes played it horribly. I don't think he's that much slower than Mims. He might actually be the same speed. I don't know what his 40 time was. But Mims just had a step on him and showed his ability to, again, track that ball downfield, make a good catch on the sideline, and ultimately leads to another touchdown. And that made the Broncos offense look way, way better than it was going to be the rest of the game because of this guy's game-breaking ability, and they didn't go back to it. So in a way, you could say this has been their best offensive weapon this year so far because they really didn't do a whole lot week 1. And the explosiveness we saw was surrounded entirely by his ability to move the ball.
Yeah, I agree. He was a huge part of their overall offensive success despite his 3 total touches, not including his special teams role. So, he had the 2 catches. The first one you mentioned, it was on cover 2. If you call it invert cover 2, like you said they did, I think that's more technical than anything because they still had 2 safeties deep. So if one of them was a nickel technically, and then the other safety rotated down for the blitz, then I guess that's how you get to that terminology. But yeah, so he just ran straight down the middle, and because it was play action 57, the mic got basically sucked up and didn't carry him down the field at all, which I do believe
that
was
is
his
actually
responsibility.
So it was supposed to be it was like a Tampa 2.
Yes.
Again, sometimes Tampa 2, we call it different things. Some teams it's cover 3. It depends on the team. But yes, that was, I forgot about that detail. Barton was supposed to carry it. And at that point, all right, Cody Barton's not covering Barton.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. But at least it gives leverage to the safeties on the back end. Yeah. But realistically, it is not a good matchup. So it was just blown from the get-go and executed well. Wilson does still have a good deep ball, as we saw. So That was the touchdown. And then the play against Forbes, it was just a tight formation and an outside release for a go ball. And I think that it's tough when you have a player with that speed and you have that much room to the sideline to get your release. Like, part of what a corner does in press against a go ball is ideally try to use that boundary and push them towards it on their release. And I think this was probably just a little bit of a mistake to not get more physical with Mims at the line of scrimmage, because if you allow him to release outside with the idea that you're going to use the boundary as an aid, well, with a player with that speed, he's going to be able to turn that corner and get upfield. And you saw, I mean, Forbes is a very fast player, but he did still put separation on him after the fact. And he did make the tackle, which was pretty athletic, to save the touchdown. But it just shows you what Mims can do. But I think, they clearly have kind of an awareness that his route skills are just not that developed, because you didn't really see him do a whole lot of anything else. He had limited snaps. I mean, going through that game, like, the amount of times that I'm just like scanning the field, just trying to figure out if 19 is out there, and a lot of them he wasn't. And then he even made a good play when they gave him the ball on the it was a handoff. I guess it's not really an end around, but so he gets the handoff and he makes somebody miss in the backfield, gets a few yards, but that's the extent of his touches. So I do expect him to progressively be more involved in the offense, but he hit on high percentage of his touches.
Yeah, some like 18 yards per route run or something. Like it's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, the Forbes thing's interesting. That we could talk about. We get on a spiel about what Denver did offensively in this game and like how well they were scripted plays, and they're running this pin pull kind of pitch concept that was working really well early on. They had a big run with Javonte Williams, scored a touchdown with it, with Jaleel McLaughlin, shot out Youngstown State, great FCS player who I have some Twitter posts about pre-draft, and now he's actually doing things in the NFL. Let's go. But they didn't go back to that concept at all the whole game. And I think that's part of the reason why you saw Forbes kind of creeping in a little bit. I think he was supposed to have outside leverage on that play, or at least, off of initial snap, like have kind of the depth from the corner to not allow him to just gain that leverage downfield. And I think that their fear of that kind of outside rushing attack that was beating Washington early in the game coming was forcing it, or not forcing, but kind of this is the thing that happens to young players that are still kind of learning what's going on. Like, your eyes take you to places that you shouldn't be in at times.
It influenced him for sure.
So, and I think that was a big part of it as well. But, again, it's like the offense is doing its job. We need a competent deep threat who can take advantage of that. And Mims is that. And I think I kind of had a 4th, 5th round grade on this guy. I think I clearly was too low on him because he has shown early on that he has stud-like ability in that department.
For sure. All right, so let's turn around to the other side. We've already talked about Forbes briefly in terms of that particular play, but he actually subbed out a lot in this game as well, but he had a lot more plays out there than Mims did. So Forbes went 1 pick before Gonzalez to the Commanders in the 1st round, and he was not a player that I watched pre-draft because I just had so many responsibilities that I watched about 40-ish, 50. We did breakdowns of 40-something guys pre-draft, and I didn't anticipate Forbes going in the 1st round, so I didn't prioritize watching him, mostly because of people's expectation that he might not go that high due to his size, because skill obviously was pretty highly touted. But when I went back and watched him and did the breakdown of him right after the draft, because I wanted to get everybody that went in the 1st round, I was actually really impressed. He's extremely instinctive in coverage. He is a player who's going to give up some stuff because he will take chances, but he's also going to make plays. And I think when you have a pass rush like the Commanders do, when you got those 4 guys, and it was nice to see Young getting some sacks out there this week. When you have those 4 guys, you want guys on the back end who can't just cover, who don't just cover, but actually get the ball back for the offense, which we did see. So I think I'll let you talk about him first a little bit, and then I'll come back because I have some notes on his performance as well.
Yeah, you talk about the rotation. Like, this is the way I want to build a modern defense. Like, they're rotating everywhere except for linebacker because they have like 3 on the roster because they really just, outside of Jamin Davis, have not cared about the position. Davis is looking good. So, whatever. Cody Barton's in there, whatever. Forbes is playing like a third of the snaps, maybe a little less. Benjamin St. Juste is playing, about the whole game, but he's moving from nickel to outside. And Kendall Fuller is a guy who's kind of on the field the whole time as an outside corner. And what they're doing is they know Fuller's really good. He's a good veteran. He's teaching these guys. He's helping them learn. He's an important part of their defense right now. He's going to be gone next year as a free agent, and Forbes will be a full-time outside corner because he's not going to play nickel. Nickel has become a position in the NFL where we're not finding 5'9", 175-pound athletes, right? We're finding like box safeties who can run, the Kyle Hamiltons, right? Literally the Cam Curls. Like we want more physical players. And that's why I think Benjamin St. Juste is playing nickel right now for them, is they at least feel comfortable with him blitzing. A, he's very good at it, and B, just having some size in the run game. But he's decent at it. It works for them for now. He's just better on the outside. Forbes, with this role, is kind of been hidden from the run game. And we saw that kind of affect him early. Wasn't an issue against Arizona. Wasn't an issue in the preseason. We saw kind of his ability to tackle. But I think when it becomes an issue is when you've got guys like on pitch plays, which you saw with Denver, like coming from depth, and he needs to come from depth as well. And it's a little different when you have to like crack down at that full speed, right? Which is not necessarily something that you see at all at college. And then now in the NFL, in college, you don't really see sweeps where the ball is tossed 5 yards backwards because there's not a confidence that your line's going to actually, have that gap integrity and keep the ball going in that direction. Like when normally you see pitch plays don't work, they can get blown up. But if that's the case, it's because someone kind of anticipated that a guard was like going to jump gaps and kind of backdoors it, right? Whereas, in college, if you run that, it doesn't work. It might just be because you don't get out there fast enough.
Right.
So you've got guys coming downhill at you that are 300 pounds athletes, and that's a little different. And he's adjusting to that. We'll see. But I think that is a reason that he didn't play as much this week as he did the week before. And it is a concern. But the main reason they drafted him was for turnovers, because they had a real hard time forcing turnovers last year. And I will say, like, the Brett Coleman's of the world said, like, oh, this guy's being overdrafted because a lot of his interceptions in college were kind of lucky and his numbers are inflated. Yeah, true. A lot of guys that get a lot of interceptions have very inflated numbers and are getting very lucky. I think what was hidden in the Emmanuel Forbes scouting report is that this guy was a very good cover 4 cornerback, regardless of his interceptions, right? He has the speed and the hip fluidity and the kind of.
And guess what coverage he got his pick on?
Yeah,
this past week.
right? And also, I will say, like, we've seen a little bit more early on, like Arizona, like the pass breakup that ended the game, like that was, I believe, I don't remember what, it might have been man coverage, it might have been off man, but if that's the case, it might have been just a cover 4 variant, but who knows? But in that game, he kind of flashed his ability to come from literally behind leverage on Hollywood Brown and get in front of a pass and break it up. It might have been Michael Wilson, I don't remember. But
yeah, I didn't watch that game. I watched 12 of the 16 games that week, and that's
that game. It was an interesting one. It was interesting. I will say that the defense did their job very well, and for outside of these scripted plays in the beginning of the game here, did again. And I think like Forbes again, he gets beat deep. The Hail Mary was a disaster that probably killed his PFF grading because it's a drop that leads to a touchdown, and that's him being young and like trying to go for the pick and like just knock it down, man. Like, goddamn.
Well, I also think he got kind of out physical. Like that is a situation where when you got 5 guys all around you.
I don't know. Everyone gets out physical in a Hail Mary unless you're like Calvin Johnson. The ball bounced off like 6 players. It's just sometimes the hand of God, right? Like that's one of those where yes, he made a bad play, but also it's like realistically, like the ball falls 6 yards short of the end zone. It's still crazy that it gets to the end zone.
Bounces into the end zone. That was pretty crazy.
With a defender getting his hand between Brandon Johnson's arms and still he holds on to it. It happens. Sometimes you gotta sum it up. I'm gonna ramble for like 5 seconds. Can I do that?
All right, go ahead.
There's a great SB Nation. John Boyce has these great like history of blank team pieces, and they just finished one on the Vikings, and it's really the whole thing's effectively a dedication piece to Bud Grant. And they finish off, spoilers, they finish off like with his final quote on the last time he was on radio, because he died recently, age of 95. Talking about how the football is the only ball outside of rugby where its shape is oblong, right? And like a large part of this game is just chance. And so we're gonna like talk about this Hail Mary, how crazy this game was all week, and like, oh wow, what a back and forth. And realistically, you look at the underlying metrics, and like outside of those scripted plays, like it was pretty much a dominated game by Washington. And we've got just, luck sometimes changes the way we look at things. And I think Forbes, for the most part, has been very solid. He's got to learn from that mistake. The interception was good. It was also kind of Russ just completely miscommunicating with his receiver, or receiver running the wrong route. I don't know what was going on there. If Forbes keeps his feet and doesn't fumble the ball, maybe he scores on that play too. Like there's a couple things here and there, but ultimately, like I kind of thought that them drafting him as a scheme fit early over Gonzalez would be a guy that's like better right off the bat. And instead, I think it's kind of the other way around, where I feel like his ceiling is going to be further down the line. We're still watching Forbes develop a little bit, kind of get used to playing against NFL offenses, and hopefully interception numbers will follow. And I think getting one already with like how little he's playing is a good sign.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to kind of go down the check boxes of what I saw in the game, there are ups and downs for sure. And so the ceiling is going to require consistency, I think, more so than anything, because we've already seen certain things he can do. Just need to see it regularly. The run defense is not good. He doesn't really want to get in there. He's like, he will really prefer to just be in the vicinity and go for the tackle if absolutely necessary. I mean, when
he's in a good position, he'll do it. It's just,
right. But he's not gonna take on a fullback, or certainly not an offensive lineman, and help crash down. You know what I mean? Like
he's not gonna cut a lineman at the knees and then blow up the play. Yeah.
No, not really. So that's a major work in progress, I think, and I'm not sure what the answer to that is, because he straight up is just not that big, but he does play physically in coverage, which is good. So it does reflect an ability and willingness to just be physical overall. So we already talked about the Mims catch. The interception was really nice. So he's in bail technique in quarters against Cortland Sutton, who against a player like that, he's actually in a great position, because he will be able to trust his athleticism very much so, right? So he's not like super scared that he's going to run by him. He can basically like use his intuition and just spatial awareness to stay with him, keeping his eyes in the backfield, which is exactly what he did. And so, whether it was a bad decision by Russ or not, or there was a lack of communication, the fact that he was in position and able to change from running backwards on a dime to cutting outside and catching the ball was very impressive.
Do you think if Sutton was running the route that Wilson thought he was running, that ball still would have been picked off?
I think there's a great chance of it.
Okay.
Because he was in really good position.
Because I didn't really look at the all-22 of that play, so I'm going to take your word for it.
Yeah, I think so. I would say yes. I mean, I don't know. Like, here's the thing. He was in great position, and the fact that Sutton actually ran a go route meant that it's not like he would have run faster and like pushed him off the ball. So, I think he would have caught it well. There was a play where he did get beaten by Sutton on the other side of the field on a double move. And it was very subtle. I mean, Sutton's a bigger guy. He's not a guy who's like has these explosive cuts. So his double move is a pretty subtle thing overall. And Forbes bid on it, but Wilson was sacked. So it ended up not being an issue in the game. But I did notice that.
I think I remember that.
And He was in cover 2 and he was trying to bait Wilson. It was really impressive. He's like, you can see him just sitting there like hoping that Wilson throws it, because he basically breaks contain, runs to the outside, and he's sitting there like on Judy, just like waiting, like giving a little space. And then Wilson sees that, tries to throw it to somebody else, and then he splits the gap and gets the pass break up there. So that was a really impressive play as well. I think that's it. Oh, then he did get beat on an outside move, called for a hold. I think it was actually a face mask, but it was only called for a hold. So there was that. So up and down, but some very impressive stuff. Like you can already see him trying to set up turnovers as well. So I do think the picks will come.
Yeah, they're using him like a weapon to finish off games, and I think what you will see is when they're winning games, his snap numbers will be way up. Versus when they're losing. He's made plays when they've been winning. He's not going to do that as much when they're losing. This is a defense that hasn't really been able to tee off when protecting a lead much at all. They're generally in these low-scoring, close games where they need to score late to win it. And early on, Arizona, we didn't see it as much early. They were still playing well. But as we've seen Washington take leads in these first 2 games, it's been different. Kind of the marrying of coverage and the pass rush and how good this defense has looked. It's looked more like kind of the Cowboys defense than it had. Like Cowboys defense has looked like this for 3 years, right? It's because they're always scoring points and they're able to kind of know the team's going to try and throw the ball to catch up and tee off and send Micah Parsons from wherever and get after the quarterback. As long as Washington is able to move the ball at least reasonably enough to have leads in games, Forbes is going to get opportunities.
All right, so we've talked quite a bit about rookies, and this I should have known that this segment was always going to go long, because it's just so interesting to actually sit down and break down these players. Because
I'm gonna lie, this game was at
8:15. It's all good. We have finally we actually get the game tape out in time to like look at this, whereas we don't have time to look at it before we do our weekly recap. So getting into these players on a deeper basis, the conversation is always going to be interesting and a little bit longer. But let's at least for the minimum pick the game. We have the Giants going to the 49ers. The Giants are plus 10.5 underdogs. Okay, so shouldn't surprise anybody. Now, they did come back and beat the Cardinals at the last possible minute last week, but it's a short week. The 49ers are, let's be honest, a far superior team. So I think the reality is that a 10.5 point favoritism here, like just my personal opinion, the only way for that to not be covered are those the random chance happenings because of the shape of the football that we were just talking about. Like you're going to need fumbles. You're going to need weird bounces. You're going to need things to happen, because the Giants' offensive line didn't look good week 1. I didn't watch it super closely in week 2, but I know that they've got guys banged up. And the 49ers' defensive line is the best in the NFL. And I know Micah Parsons is incredible in general, but however much he elevates the rest of the defensive line, like they've got 3 guys who are like right underneath that caliber in San Francisco. So it's just like you got all these guys coming from all directions. Nobody's safe from mismatches there. I just have a hard time seeing the Giants really move the ball with any kind of sustained success. How do you feel about this playing out?
I actually like the Giants in this line. I don't think there's any chance they win tonight, but I thought that, yes, their O-lines look bad. I do think we're underrating the Cardinals defense right now. Like I think it has played well through 2 weeks, and we'll see how that ages, but I think that they're playing hard, running around. They have a nice rotation of pass rushers. They're giving these different looks. They're giving these balanced looks with like quarterbacks who aren't as good at setting protections, they're struggling with. The second half, they score 31 points, or 24, I guess. I don't know. They scored a touchdown in the first half. I don't remember. But it looked like the Giants' offense of last year, and it looked like what it would look like if it was what we expected coming into the season, with Darren Waller kind of getting involved and Jalen Hyatt catching passes downfield, Daniel Jones playing really well, running the ball. And I think maybe it just took them some time to wake up a little bit. So that's kind of my theory right now. I don't think they're as bad as they've looked. I know the O-line's not brilliant, but it wasn't fantastic last year either. And I still think, we could be waiting on some development from guys like Evan Neal as the year goes on. So I think they will show some flashes tonight. There's going to be some big boo-boos, I think, as well with that pass rush getting after them. But I also think that their defense hasn't played as well as they can so far. And I think, again, like that's a unit who improved as the year went on. I think we'll see a little bit better fight from them tonight. They haven't played their best ball yet. And I think no one is expecting them to win. They're going to come out there, come punching a little bit tonight. Niners are the better team. I think they cruise, but I think the Giants' backdoor covering is very possible. And I ultimately, I think the floor with Daniel Jones is too high for them to just completely fall apart as a team this season.
Now, I mean, I'm not assuming you don't know this, but do you know that Saquon Barkley is not playing in this game?
Yeah, and I honestly, I'm going to take the side of I don't think it's going to affect them that much because they're getting the ball out so quickly that it's hard to impact the game. This is what Washington struggled with last year. It's you get an even game with this team and you can't affect the game defensively because they don't let you. They would rather punt the ball. They will just run the ball into, the line of scrimmage or just have Daniel Jones take a step and throw it the quick out, for a yard upfield and let you make the tackle. They started doing more of that stuff. And I think early in the season, they said, hey, let's try and be like a normal offense. And that's not what they are. They aren't, quite frankly, talented enough to be that. And the scheming is fantastic when they do decide to kind of throw in the RPO stuff and really start getting the misdirection going. And yes, I think Barkley affects them. I honestly think his pass catching is a bigger problem for them replacement wise than what he's on the ground, because the Niners run defense, I think, can be had more than their ability to deal with a pass rush. But I also think that the Giants aren't a team that you just stack the box against and are we can stop the run.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We just have the opening kickoff done and the first play from scrimmage starting. So we're going to get out of here. We're going to start watching this game, and then I will be back later tonight with Coach Kevin Spencer to talk about the game that was. And then we'll also have Matthew Brown on to talk fantasy. And then you'll be able to get all of that plus our rookie breakdown in the podcast tomorrow morning. So, Nick, appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks for joining. Looking forward to doing this again next week. I'm going to try and suck up a little more of your time in the near future. So we'll see if I can get you. All right.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, y'all. We will see you again after the game.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.